Welcome everybody to my first episode in the podcast series Leaders in Safety. I am lucky enough today to have my first guest being Melissa Pollock. Melissa is the head of life safety at Scentre Group, which is the owner and operator of Westfield. So Melissa, thank you and welcome to my first episode.
Thanks, Nathan. I'm very glad to be here and more excited to be here for episode 1.
No, I really appreciate it. And before we kick off, Melissa, maybe just a little bit about your background.
No worries. Look, I am a HR professional to begin with who fell kicking and screaming into safety about 10 years into my almost 25-year working career. And I absolutely hated it in the first couple of months. And then I really realised what an awesome profession safety was, because it was really about genuine care and concern for people. But I think also it was really about trying to influence people to change behaviours, which, you know, is really, really hard to do. And so I think when you can do that over your career and you can do that well, it's a really rewarding career to be in. And I'm very, very passionate about safety as a profession. And ultimately, I think, you know, coming to work should actually make you better as a human being, not just take away from that experience.
No, I couldn't agree more. And just for our listeners, in terms of Scentre Group, maybe just a really quick overview of how big and where they're located, etc.
Right. So as you indicated, Scentre Group's the owner and operator of Westfield in Australia and New Zealand. So we've got 42 living centres across Australia and New Zealand. And I think, you know, the typical risk profile and things that go around running a large sort of facility in terms of facilities management, risk security, that sort of thing. What people don't often know about Scentre Group is that we do also do all of our own design and construction. So we have quite a diverse risk profile in that sense, and try to keep everything from conceptualizing a living centre to the building of that living centre, and then owning and operating in conjunction with JV partners, the actual living centres themselves.
Oh, interesting. Oh, look, thanks for that overview, Melissa. I mean, one of the things that I was actually interested to kick things off with was, during your career, what do you see as being the biggest positive change that's happened in work health and safety?
I think for me, you know, the recent sort of recognition around safety differently, to use those words that most safety professionals should understand, but, you know, that building off safety 1 into safety 2, there was so much value in safety 1 from, you know, the engineering perspective and the hard and the fast risk controls and all that great work that we did. But as a younger safety professional, and it was possibly reflective of my HR days, I used to always think, why are we not asking the people more about how to do their job? They've got the answers to do this. Why do we, you know, always come across like we don't trust them, and corporate or the safety team, you know, always know better and are coming across the top? And so I think when there was finally a language around safety 2, and, you know, trust people, they've got the answers, you know, give them the things they need to do the job, let them go. For me, that was a really refreshing change in safety. And I think we've gotten so far with safety 1 that safety 2 is only the next path that we can go down to make more positive improvements. And, you know, we got so far in terms of injury reduction, but, you know, how are we monitoring risk controls, and how do we give a business some assurance of all the things that could go wrong that probably won't? They've got the right controls in place, and then all the things that are going wrong, we're still doing the right things to reduce those as well. And, you know, to me, that safety 2 piece really gives a business the opportunity to effectively monitor and manage WHS for the business.
I mean, on the flip side, what have you been most disappointed about? I mean, is there something that you're still frustrated about, disappointed about? What do we as a you know, organisation, people need to strive for to be better? Is there something that eats away at you?
I think I'm still disappointed in general around our inability to pick up on safety as a whole in terms of physical and psychological safety. We still, you know, there's been great changes. If you just look at New South Wales regulator, you know, about to release, it's still in draft, but one of the first code of practices around psychological safety. But if you compare that one code of practice that talks to psychological safety versus all the physical codes of practice that we have for the different risks, it's still completely imbalanced. You know, the legislation for many years has spoke about creating a safe workplace. And even, I think now we've come to understand, even in traditional high-risk blue-collar industries, there's always been psychological, or should always have been, psychosocial hazards and risks, and therefore controls on those risk registers. I still think we talk a lot about it because we're not understanding it, or we're not implementing it properly. I think we cloud it with the fact that, you know, that mental health and ill health in society is generally on the rise as well. And so there's a lot of businesses I still think are a bit hands off with what they think is their responsibility, where work has caused that. I think in the safety profession, we don't talk about work design enough, you know, to sort of own, it seems like it's dirty words, you know. So I think for me, I'm just really disappointed in our profession. And, you know, again, this is a big sweeping generalization because there are some people doing some phenomenally great things, but, you know, creating a safe environment for someone is physical and psychological safety. And you can't keep me physically safe, but I'm not psychologically safe, because how can I come into work and still feel okay and then still perform at my best? So I think there's a long way for us to go as a profession when it comes to psychological safety.
No, it's interesting. And I think the whole impact of COVID and how that's affecting people both at home, where they're further away from the office floor, and returning to work. I mean, I do think a lot about how that's going to affect not just the leaders of health and safety, but the whole business. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting journey over the next sort of 12 to 18 months. Switching a little bit now in terms of people and teams, you know, you don't get to where you are without not having built great teams around you, or hire great people. You know, what has been your strategy for that, in terms of trying to find them, attract them, but retain them and develop them as people?
I think predominantly I try to create a really positive working environment. And for anyone that listens or watches that knows me, I generally do that through humour. And doesn't surprise anyone that in my spare time I've been an amateur comedian. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, we can still do some serious things, and you can still actually be positive and have fun while you're doing that. And if you can create that environment, then, you know, you might have some really hard challenges. You know, it could be that there's challenges with, you know, senior management that you're working with, but if you've got a positive environment as a team, you're working on that together, I think you can keep people in some hard roles for a lot longer. I think for me as well, I try to look at the people around me, and they may be direct reports, indirect reports, and even people, you know, colleagues and above. But it's really, you know, people are good at certain things, and it's that strengths-based approach. So there'll be things that they're good at that they really enjoy doing. There's things they're good at they don't enjoy doing. But the ones that they're good at that they really get a good buzz from, how do you give them opportunity to A, recognize that, but B, actually do more of those things? Because that is really, really good for well-being and positive well-being as well. And, you know, working through people's jobs, and sometimes that's actually resulted in, if you can't change a person's job enough, people leaving businesses and teams I've been involved in because they've actually realised they're not doing something they enjoy. And for me, that's actually a win. You might lose a really good team member, but they'll go on and find something that they really, really do enjoy doing, and they're actually then going to be better and more productive at that job as well. I think for me as a leader, I'm fairly open, I'm fairly honest. But also I think it's around creating, you know, some of those general things we talk about. What are the expectations of this role? You know, what are the things that a person needs to deliver? How does that person want to be managed? Like when I come into a new role and I've got a new team, I'll instantly say, what do you like from a manager? What's the kind of style? But also, do you want to catch up formally? Are you the person that wants to, you know, have an hour once a week, or will you just tap on my door when something comes your way and we talk about it that way? And I think, you know, whatever those expectations and goalposts are that you set with someone, and they will be dependent, you know, depending on the person and the level of role that person is in as well, you know, how much autonomy or coaching you need to give them. But you just need to let people go. You need to trust them that they are then doing their job, but just every now and then you need to verify that those things are happening. So if you're not seeing the deliverables that you need to come through, it's questioning those people as to why. And there could be a raft of reasons for those. It could be something outside of work impacting, it could be something inside of work impacting, it could be actually we've set this person up to fail because they weren't the right deliverables, or something else has come into play. And having those conversations early. And then, you know, it's essentially about managing someone's performance. And I mean that in the sense of all the things that are going well, rewarding them, recognizing them, the thank yous. I quite often love a little random gift, or, you know, you take someone out to lunch for saying a good job, or earlier on a call today, I had someone finish a secondment within the team and just called out really publicly what an awesome job this person had done, knowing that for him, that's probably one of the ways that he likes to be thanked as well. So, and again, just conversely, if someone's not doing a great job, call it out, why it's not meeting expectations, and again, drill into why that is and how you can support that person. And it might be coaching, mentoring. It could be some external skills that they need. It could also be, again, not fit for the job, and then you'll need to exit that person accordingly.
Oh, that's some really good advice there. I mean, one thing you touched on there was there seems to be quite a big split between the technical skills of a work health and safety professional and the soft skills. And I talk to safety professionals every day, very senior people, mid-tier people as well. But one thing that seems to come up always is the soft skills. And again, leading to my next question, in your role, there is significant stakeholder influencing, a lot, not just at the boardroom level, but also at the shop floor, all the way through the organization. And I think developing people's ability to have those influencing skills. What sort of bits of advice have you got in terms of how to go about influencing people, not across the whole spectrum of the organization?
I think, again, my old HR days coming out here, but, to use the term EQ just around that emotional intelligence, right? I think, if you are genuinely curious about people and you genuinely have a care for them, it doesn't matter whether they are the CEO or someone on the shop floor or anywhere else in between. You will be present with them. You will take the time to get to know them, and your currency with that person will always be the fact that you can remember that it was, their dog's birthday or their child's birthday or something about last time you spoke. They went and saw that movie, whatever it is, and so they know that you've been present, they know that you've listened, they know that you care, and that will work with 99.9% of the people. And I think that's a way to develop influence where you don't ever need to use your positional power or your positional structure within the business. And I think for me, I've always been pretty good at that, I think. And, that's where when you need to get things done really rapidly, you can call on people and they will help you. Conversely, then those other people who are letting you know that things are going on in the business, whether they're meant to be telling you or not. And those are some of the best relationships to have. And I think as well, when you've got that kind of emotional currency with people, they are more likely to then listen when you have things to say. And I think at the senior level of a business, you then just need to be quite succinct with what you're saying and calling out stuff without an ego attached, because sometimes, if we're genuinely honest, we should be calling out ourselves as a function within that business, or we might be needing to call out other people for things that aren't happening. So at the end of the day, the business and the CEO or the managing director need to know they're effectively managing WHS for the business.
Do you think that what sort of image does work health and safety have within an organisation from the other functions? Do you find there is an image? Is there an image problem? Is it one which it's still a because functions like finance, sales, marketing, IT, HR have been around forever, but work health and safety is still something which is in progress and developing. What's your views on that?
Look, I think there is still a bit of a traditional defund police thing out there, if I'm brutally honest. But I think that's probably due to it's probably even a more mature safety function that is maybe sort of only that safety one and very compliance driven and hasn't really changed the way they've dealt with people. I think there's a real push within both businesses and our profession, to be a trusted advisor or an enabler. I think some of the things I really appreciate about my current role in particular is, us coming in and going, well, and, I'm part of a broader enterprise risk function, if I speak sort of, more broadly around risk, but we're not there to stop things. We're there to make sure things still happen, but we want to be part of that conversation really early to identify and call out early and then reposture and adjust controls if that's what we need to do. We're about helping the business do things. We're just about helping them do it in the right way. And I think good safety functions do that as well. And again, they're called upon early, and you will see it in different businesses where they are left out of conversations, and it is because either the function's set up incorrectly and it is a barrier, it is a blocker, it's more forms, it's more paperwork, or the individuals themselves as teams and professionals are coming across that way as well. I think it's changing. I think, you probably saw a lot more of that old school approach maybe 20 years ago when I started in the profession. We are seeing enablers, advisors, business partners as the way forward.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing it. I mean, I'm actually quietly surprised and about how impressionable people are, and there is a real sort of passion and desire to make this discipline, this function, I guess, a really strong voice at the boardroom table and all through the organisation. One of the things that I've noticed actually going through just chatting to people about their careers and experiences is there seems to be a lot of people who have when they've gone for jobs, when they've been interviewing for a role, and they've obviously asked questions and really try to find out about the position, they've been given a lot of information and insights, which when they've started have been quite different. It's like, oh, when I turned up, it's a lot different to what I was expecting, and you know, whether the business has been in a bit more trouble from a safety perspective, whether it's been more people issues or whatever. When someone's going for a role and they're wanting to get a bit of do their own audit on an organisation, have you got any advice, Melissa, in terms of what indicators a person can use, maybe what questions they can be asking about an organisation to make sure that when they do start, there is little surprises as possible to ensure that their first 6 to 12 months is as productive and efficient as possible?
Yeah, and look, I think it's and hopefully this comes out in the way it's intended, but I think if it's someone who's joining a safety team under a safety lead, then the questions you would ask would probably be very different. You should be able to trust that person, that they can give you some indication around culture, challenges, you know, what the team environment's like, again, what they're like to work as a manager, and that should give you enough of an assessment. I think it's much harder at the levels of people that you're talking to, you know, in relation to these podcasts. We are going in as the heads of safety or the GM. So if there's been a professional in there before us, or it's a newly created role, you know, perhaps the people that are recruiting, who are probably going to be the C-suite, they don't actually know what's going on, or they don't actually know what they need. So it's probably a far harder conversation to try to assess when you get, you know, these really small snippets of opportunity as part of a recruitment process. But, you know, I'd be trying to ask things around some general sort of legislative compliance. Where are they at? You know, how they report on safety. Is it just lag indicators? Is there some idea around risk and, you know, how effective the system is? Again, where does sort of safety sit or report in the organisation? Have they kind of done some cultural surveys? What do they see as the challenges for safety? What do they see as the good things that have been going on? But I think for me, at the end of the day, it's really interesting as I was thinking about this question. Really, I think it's about your manager, and it doesn't matter where you are in an organisation. I would be really talking to the person I was going to report to, and I'd be getting an assessment around their leadership style, how they were going to work with my leadership style, what they saw as the challenges, and how they were going to support you. Because again, at the end of the day, you might have something really, really hard facing you as a head of safety or a GM of safety, but if the person that is on your team has got your back, anything's possible, and I think you can get through that challenge. So that's sort of how I would kind of answer it. I think at the moment, what I'm sort of seeing, and I've seen it probably for a few years, is that, again, this term safety differently, there are a lot of organisations starting to say, you know, we are ready for this journey. And I don't think they quite understand what that journey is. And look, I think a good head of safety or GM of safety sometimes will just need to take a risk going into an organisation and just go, look, they may or may not be where they said they are. But then, as you know, as me as a professional, am I okay to go into a business that's telling me that they want to do kind of all the transformational people stuff, and that's what I've got the budget for, and there's already an appetite to do that, but you get there and actually they're back in the systems and all these other things, and you might actually be quite okay with that, but you might not, because it might not be doing the things that you enjoy doing. So that's a very roundabout answer to say, I think there's certain things that you will check and there's certain levers that you pull, but at the end of the day, you'll make a decision and you'll need to jump. And sometimes it's really not until you get in there that you actually find out if the rhetoric that you got told during the interview process is actually what's going on within the business. But by then, you're probably already committed and seeing the challenges and having fun.
No, exactly. I mean, there's so many different factors that sway someone's decision to join. And I think one important, I guess, behavioral trait that I respect a lot is resilience and the ability to push through even in, harder circumstances. But there's some really good advice actually for people that might be going through that process at the moment. You've said some interesting things. In your career, Melissa, has it been an individual or someone who's had a really big impact on you, whether it was at the start of your journey, at the end, whether it was somebody that was senior in, say, work health and safety, or maybe it was somebody who's in a different function? Has there been someone like that in your journey?
Yeah, look, I think there's been lots of people throughout my career. There's probably two that I'd call out, and interestingly, it's the first and probably the most recent. But the very first person that I worked with when I was at Wollongong City Council, and I was thrown into that safety role from the HR team. And we didn't get on well for a couple of weeks, and then we just suddenly kind of like clicked, and this whole world opened up to me. And he was this beautiful gentleman who'd worked in safety all his life, and just taught me so much and mentored me so much, on many levels. And I went back to his retirement dinner, I think it was about 5 years ago, and he said, I was one of the people he was most proud of, or things he was most proud of. So that was really lovely. And I think really because he could have broken me for a safety career. Like if that I didn't want to go, and if that didn't go well, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. And I think my current manager, I appreciate the impact that he's had on my career, because I think he just, he's not a WHS professional. He's a director of risk and audit. But what I love is his willingness to question why we do the things that we're doing. And I thought I was very good at questioning why we did the things in safety, but he's added this whole other level, and we can have these great, robust whiteboard conversations around actually what's the legislation telling us that we should do, and how can we best achieve that in a business that is really lean, very reactive, super fast. And we come up with these really excellent things. And I think between both of us, we've implemented some really good things within Scentre Group that have really raised the profile of life safety, as we call it, within the business. So I really appreciate and have been very much influenced by him in the last couple of years of my career.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned implementation then. Looking at your career, maybe looking at something you've worked on, you've implemented and seen the fruits of that. Has there been one example that's been the most rewarding of your work experience? Something you've worked on hard and put your passion into and seen, whether it's been, saving a life or making an organization better, or a cultural shift or something like that?
The first thing that sprung to mind was actually when I was with State Emergency Service. It seems very promotional to say this, but we got a 1-800 OHS SES number, and we held on to that. And in the time that I was there, that was meant to be our incident reporting number, and we just didn't quite get it over the line. But I do remember hearing, not sure whether they still use it, but like years later, they'd finally got this, for 10,000 volunteers across New South Wales, you could ring when there was an incident instead of having to report it through a system. And so that's probably one of the very small things I'm very proud of, looking back on my career. So
I like those stories, the old ones, but the basic but the good ones. That's nice. As a final question, Melissa, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is engaging with people who are the up and coming GMs of safety, people that they've got their sights set on an executive role and a leadership role and a management role. They may be in a number 2, number 3 role right now. What sort of advice do you have for people like that are aspiring to go to that level?
I think there's a couple of things, again, coming back to that care and curiosity. Like, hopefully that is why you're in the safety profession. So don't forget why we're in here around that care and curiosity piece, because often I think the higher up you get, for want of better words, there can often be more politics, or there's governance structures, or there's lots of influence, and there's far more navigating, what the business expectations are, and how, again, you make the whole safety function an enabler rather than a disabler. And it's that balance between remembering why we do what we do around care and concern, but also then becoming the organisation's compass for if WHS is effective. You are the senior trusted advisor. You need to be in the boardroom or in those executive committee meetings and actually telling the business in a really black and white way, without egos, if safety's performing. And that could be calling out operational parts of the business that you're at the same time trying to develop and maintain those good relationships with. But it could also be calling out yourself or your own team for the things that you haven't delivered on. But that is our role. It is to make sure, in terms of those directors and those officers or those people running that business, that they understand if WHS is effectively being managed, and that is, do we have the right resources? That is, do we actually understand the hazards associated to this business? Are we getting all those indicators, lead and lag, reported up in there? Are we effectively then managing and controlling those risks and putting the right resources to maintaining those things? And I think that is our job when we get to the senior echelons of the business, and that is why we have the seat at the table. And I don't know many people who comfortably sit there and always say, I don't need to stress, safety is all being effectively managed and we all have the resources that we want and need. Because I think if you're at that point, then the conversation you start having is, well, how do we actually do things better? How do we become our industry leader? How do we push the barrow forward in terms of better or more effective risk controls? So that would probably be my advice. Just understand what your role is as the compass point of the business around effective WHS, but don't forget care, curiosity, concern, and keeping people safe, which is why we probably started in the safety profession to begin with.
Absolutely. The odd person I speak to at the moment seems to be doing some sort of course or further education. As a final point, I mean, is there any sort of advice as to what sort of, I guess, academic sort of study, add-ons to their existing, qualifications that people could look at as an option when they are, whether they're sort of 8 to 10 years, they're in a middle management role, they're wanting to further themselves outside of the classic sort of MBAs and things like that? Is there something that you see quite common within the work health and safety sector?
It's really a good question, Nathan, because I think as a profession, we're so diverse, even just including, kind of like the either certificates, diplomas, or the bachelor degrees that we do have. And, I was actually going to say, I would suggest to safety leaders, perhaps an MBA, to get that broader understanding of how the organisation works if you don't have that experience. Like, how do you get that, again, valued seat at the table? Because you understand how the business works and you understand how the business is going to grow. And I always think about Wade Needham, who hopefully you'll talk to on one of the episodes. I think he's really, really great at doing that very quickly. I think personally, which won't probably surprise anyone listening to this, I've studied a lot of the sort of HR things, or, more recently the neuroscience and the positive psychology. I think coaching is always good. So much of what we do in safety, again, at whatever level we are within the business, is often coaching people. So that's always some good qualifications to look at. And again, I think, look at the traditional safety qualifications, because not everyone has those. And I talk to you and, I have a diploma in OH&S, but it's backed with industrial relations, sociology, some neuroscience, some business wellbeing courses, and we are starting to see a lot more of those being run by the universities as well. But I'd probably highly encourage, looking at an institute like the Australian Institute of Health and Safety, and certainly at least getting your certification, because there's ongoing professional development, there's levels of certification which can give businesses comfort that they are starting to get some consistency to the safety professionals that they're seeing come into their organizations.
No, absolutely. No, thank you so much, Melissa. Look, I've really enjoyed our chat, and your insights have been really fascinating. I hope that the value and purpose of this podcast is to allow those that are out there in the work health and safety profession, no matter what sort of level they're at, if they can just listen to a couple of takeaways that you've got, that makes their situation better than it was before listening to this. So thank you. It's been a real pleasure for you to come on board. Thank you for being my first guest. I really appreciate that. And I wish you all the best with your career journey and how that goes, and everything at Scentre Group. So,
all right, thanks for having me, Nathan.
Not a problem at all. Take care. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.